Henry and Ben had been friends for as long as they could remember. From the first time they met in middle school, both at the back of the line during gym class, trying to avoid running laps, their bond had been unshakable. Now in their 30s, their lives were simple but comfortable. Henry, a towering figure with a deep love for books, worked as a librarian. His days were spent among dusty shelves and quiet patrons, which suited him just fine. On the other hand, Ben, with his round belly and constant grin, ran a small but popular diner called Benny's Best. Henry loved his peace and quiet, while Ben loved talking to people. If you walked into Benny's Best, you'd often see Ben behind the counter, laughing loudly as he flipped burgers or served coffee. His favorite joke was telling customers the food was so good, even I couldn't resist, as he patted his belly for effect. They were an odd pair, but they balanced each other out perfectly. One Thursday afternoon, Henry was at the diner, sitting at his usual booth near the window. He had a book in hand, a sandwich on the table, and Ben's laughter echoing from the kitchen. Everything was as it always was, peaceful, predictable, and completely ordinary. That was until the door swung open, and Sarah marched in. Sarah was an old friend, a tough-as-nails police officer who had grown up in the same neighborhood as Henry and Ben. She was smart, determined, and always had a look of purpose in her eyes. Today, however, her expression was more intense than usual. She spotted Henry in his booth and rushed over, her police boots squeaking on the floor. "Henry, we need to talk," she said, her voice urgent. Ben popped his head out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. "Hey, Sarah." "Want the usual. Cheeseburger with extra fries." "Not now, Ben," Sarah replied, waving him off. Henry put down his book, adjusting his glasses. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I wish it was just a ghost," she muttered, sliding into the booth across from him. She glanced around the diner as if someone might be listening. "I need help. Serious help." Ben, ever curious, came out from behind the counter and sat down next to Henry, squeezing his large frame into the booth. "You need help? With what? Did someone steal all the donuts from the station again?" Sarah didn't laugh. "This is bigger than donuts, Ben. I'm working undercover on a case. Some high-level tech has been stolen, and I'm tracking the people responsible. But my team, they're compromised. I can't trust anyone at the station right now." Henry raised an eyebrow. "So what does this have to do with us? I need backup, and you two are the only ones I can trust." Ben blinked. "Us? Backup? Sarah, we're not exactly the backup type." He patted his stomach. "Do I look like someone who runs toward danger? I can barely run to the fridge." Henry nodded in agreement. "Ben's right. Let's just say, not in shape for this kind of thing." Sarah sighed, leaning in closer. "Listen, it's not about being in shape. It's about being there when I need someone to have my back. You two are the only people who won't blow my cover. No one would suspect you. Two regular guys just going about their day." Ben chuckled nervously. "Yeah, two regular guys who happen to be really good at eating burgers and reading books." Sarah's eyes softened for a moment. "I know it sounds crazy, but I don't have anyone else to turn to. Please, just hear me out." Henry looked at Ben, and Ben looked at Henry. They had been friends with Sarah for years, and they both knew that when she was in trouble, she meant it. And though they were far from the action hero types, they also knew they couldn't just let her down. "What exactly would you need us to do?" Henry asked cautiously. "Nothing too dangerous, I promise," Sarah replied. "There's this party tonight, a fancy event where the suspects are going to make a deal. I need you two to go in, blend with the crowd, and keep an eye on things. I'll be there too, but I can't be everywhere at once." Ben snorted. "Blend in? At a fancy party? We're about as subtle as a pair of elephants in a china shop." Sarah shot him a look. "You don't need to be subtle. Just don't cause a scene. You go in, you enjoy the food, you keep your eyes open, and if anything weird happens, you let me know. That's it." Henry and Ben exchanged glances again, this time with more hesitation. They could see the seriousness in Sarah's eyes, and despite their reservations, they couldn't say no to her. "All right," Henry finally said with a sigh. "We'll do it." Ben groaned but nodded. "Yeah, count us in. But if there's no food at this party, I'm out." Sarah smiled for the first time since she walked in. "Trust me, Ben, there will be plenty of food." And just like that, the quiet, predictable lives of Henry and Ben were about to take a very unexpected turn. Henry stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the bow tie Sarah had given him. The crisp white shirt he wore felt like a prison, and the jacket was just tight enough to make him feel like a stuffed sausage. "Do people actually wear these things for fun?" he muttered, glancing over at Ben, who was struggling to button his own suit jacket. "This feels like a straitjacket," Ben groaned, pulling at the fabric as if trying to escape it. His round face was flushed from the effort of dressing up, and he looked like he was about to pass out from the sheer stress of being in formal wear. "And how does this thing not come with an elastic waistband?" Henry adjusted his glasses and sighed. "This is going to be a disaster, isn't it?" Sarah, standing in the doorway, gave them a once-over and smirked. "You both look, well, let's just say you'll definitely stand out, but not in a bad way. Just try to act like you belong. Remember, you're not there to fight anyone. Just blend in, keep your eyes open, and if you see anything suspicious, signal me." "Right," Henry said, nodding. "Blend in. No fighting. We've got this." Ben stared at Sarah, wide-eyed. "What's the signal? Do we whistle? Wave? Or, ooh, can I do the Macarena?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "No dancing, Ben. Just give me a subtle nod or scratch your ear. Something normal." Ben looked deflated but nodded. "Okay, but if someone challenges me to a dance-off, I'm just saying I won't back down." Henry shook his head, already imagining the catastrophe that would follow. "Let's just survive the night, Ben." The party was being held at the fanciest hotel in the city. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, and everyone there looked like they had just walked off the cover of a fashion magazine. Henry and Ben, on the other hand, stuck out like sore thumbs. Two large, awkward men in suits that didn't quite fit, and with expressions that screamed, "We don't belong here." As they entered, Henry tried to remember Sarah's advice. Blend in. He glanced around at the elegant guests, all of whom were sipping champagne and chatting, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. He picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, figuring it might help him look the part. Ben, on the other hand, zeroed in on the buffet table immediately. "Blending in means eating, right?" he whispered to Henry as he piled his plate high with hors d'oeuvres. Henry rolled his eyes. "Ben, you're supposed to be watching the crowd, not inhaling the food." "I am watching the crowd," Ben said, stuffing a tiny sandwich into his mouth. "I'm just multitasking." Before Henry could argue, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see a tall, well-dressed man giving him an appraising look. "Excuse me, sir," the man said smoothly, "but I believe you're standing a little too close to my wife." Henry's face went pale as he realized he had, in fact, been standing awkwardly close to a woman who was now glaring at him. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he stammered, stepping back quickly. In his panic, his elbow knocked over his champagne glass, spilling it directly onto the man's expensive shoes. The man's eyes widened, and Henry froze, holding the empty glass with a look of pure horror. My bad," Henry mumbled. The man's face turned red with anger, but before he could say anything, a loud commotion erupted near the buffet table. Henry looked over to see Ben, now surrounded by a small group of guests, including a man in a sharp suit who looked like he belonged in an action movie. The sharp-suited man was watching Ben intently, nodding along as Ben danced. "What on earth is he doing?" Henry whispered to himself as he watched Ben attempting to dance with an enthusiasm that clearly didn't match his skill level. The sharp-suited man raised an eyebrow and stepped forward, suddenly joining in. He started dancing with precision, clearly challenging Ben to a dance-off. Henry rushed over, trying to make sense of the situation. "Ben, what are you doing?" "I don't know," Ben gasped between dance moves. "I was just eating, and then this guy started challenging me. I couldn't say no, Henry. The man has moves." As Ben flailed and twirled, the crowd cheered, clearly entertained by the impromptu performance. The sharp-suited man, now sweating, seemed to be taking the challenge seriously, throwing in complicated spins and steps that Ben tried, unsuccessfully, to copy. Meanwhile, Henry's eyes darted around the room, trying to find Sarah. In the middle of the chaos, he spotted her talking to a man near the back. Her expression was calm, but Henry could see she was keeping a close eye on the situation. He waved to her subtly, hoping she would understand that things were spiraling out of control. Suddenly, as the dance-off continued, one of the waiters rushed past Henry, looking suspiciously out of place. The waiter was carrying a silver briefcase, definitely not a normal item for someone serving hors d'oeuvres. Without thinking, Henry tried to follow him, bumping into another guest and knocking over a tray of drinks in the process. "Sorry! Sorry!" Henry apologized as he stumbled through the crowd, trying to keep his eye on the waiter. As the waiter reached the exit, Henry lunged, managing to grab hold of the man's jacket. The waiter turned, panicked, and tried to shake him off, but Henry, with his sheer size, accidentally sent both of them crashing into a dessert table. Pastries and cakes flew through the air as the crowd gasped. Henry, covered in frosting, struggled to stand. But before the waiter could make his escape, Sarah appeared, handcuffing the man in one swift move. Ben, oblivious to the action happening around him, had finally collapsed into a chair, panting from the intense dance-off. The sharp-suited man, also exhausted, nodded at Ben in respect before slinking away. As the dust settled, Sarah walked over to Henry, who was still wiping cake from his face. "Well," she said, raising an eyebrow, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." Henry groaned. "I think we just ruined the party." Sarah smiled. "Maybe, but you also just stopped the trade." "Nice job, Henry." Ben, still catching his breath, looked up. "Wait, did we win?" "You could say that," Sarah said with a chuckle. "Now let's get out of here before someone asks us to pay for the broken dessert table." As they made their way to the exit, Ben grinned. "You see, Henry? We're natural-born detectives. And hey, I even won a dance-off." Henry just shook his head, thinking to himself that if this was what undercover work was like, they might not survive the next mission. After the chaos at the party, Henry and Ben found themselves back at Benny's Best, sitting at their usual booth. But instead of their usual chatter about books, burgers, or Ben's next great diner recipe, the two friends were silent. The reality of what they had stumbled into was starting to sink in. Ben broke the silence first. "Henry, we're in over our heads. I mean, did you see those guys at the party? They looked like they came straight out of an action movie. And what did I do? I got into a dance-off." Henry, poking at the remains of his sandwich, sighed. "I know, Ben, but Sarah needs us, and we can't just walk away." "Not now." As if summoned by their words, Sarah burst through the diner doors, her expression a mix of determination and exhaustion. "Boys, we've got a problem," Ben groaned. "Another one? Can't the bad guys take a break? I'm still sore from all that dancing." Sarah slid into the booth across from them, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "The criminals are spooked after what happened at the party. They know something went wrong, and they're making their next move tonight. If we don't stop them, they're going to disappear with that stolen tech, and we'll lose them for good." Henry looked at Sarah, his stomach twisting with anxiety. "What do you need us to do?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing her options. "I need you two to come with me to the warehouse district. That's where the handoff is going to happen. But this time, it's not a fancy party. It's going to be dangerous." Ben blinked, his face going pale. "Warehouse district? Dangerous? Sarah, I'm a diner owner, not Bruce Willis." Sarah smirked. "Don't worry, I'll be there with you the whole time. But if you're going to be part of this, you need to know a few basic self-defense moves." Ben and Henry exchanged uneasy glances. The three of them found themselves at a local gym later that afternoon. It was empty, save for a few mats on the floor and a punching bag hanging limply in the corner. Sarah stood in front of them, arms crossed, as Henry and Ben awkwardly stretched, clearly uncomfortable in their borrowed gym clothes. "All right," Sarah said, clapping her hands together. "First, I'm going to show you how to block an attack. It's simple. Just keep your arms up, like this." She demonstrated the move with perfect form, her arms raised defensively in front of her body. "Now you try." Henry, feeling like a fish out of water, raised his arms. They were shaky and uneven, but he did his best. Ben, on the other hand, was struggling to lift his arms above his chest. "I think my arms are too short for this," he muttered, grunting with the effort. Sarah sighed but tried to stay encouraging. "It's okay. Just try to keep them up. Now imagine someone's coming at you and you need to defend yourself. Can we imagine they're holding a pizza instead? Ben asked, only half joking. Focus, Ben, Sarah snapped. They continued their lesson, moving from blocks to punches. Henry managed a weak jab at the punching bag, his face scrunched in concentration. Ben, however, swung too hard and ended up spinning around in a circle, nearly toppling over. Whoa, whoa! Ben yelped as he caught his balance. These moves are harder than they look. Ben, you're not supposed to spin, Sarah said, pinching the bridge of her nose in frustration. Henry, wiping sweat from his forehead, was just as discouraged. We're not cut out for this, Sarah. We're going to get ourselves, and probably you, hurt. Sarah opened her mouth to respond when the gym door creaked open, and in walked two small-time crooks, low-level thugs who had apparently been following them. They were part of the criminal gang, but hadn't been involved in the party fiasco, so they didn't recognize Henry and Ben. Their faces were full of misplaced confidence as they approached. You two shouldn't be here, one of the thugs sneered, cracking his knuckles. Sarah's sticking her nose where it doesn't belong, and we're here to make sure she knows it. Henry and Ben froze. This was it, the real deal. No more dancing or cocktail parties. These were actual criminals standing in front of them. Sarah moved to step in, but the thugs were quicker, lunging toward Henry and Ben with surprising speed. Henry, panicked, raised his arms as Sarah had taught him, but instead of blocking the thug's punch, he tripped over his own feet and fell forward, crashing directly into the thug's chest with his full weight. The man let out a wheezing gasp, eyes wide, as he stumbled backward, collapsing onto the gym floor, pinned under Henry's massive frame. Did I just win? Henry gasped, trying to catch his breath. Ben, meanwhile, was faring no better. The second thug took a swing at him, but Ben, in an attempt to dodge, spun around and tripped over the mat. His enormous body rolled into the thug like a bowling ball, knocking him flat onto his back with a loud thud. The room went silent. Henry and Ben lay sprawled on the floor, panting and red-faced, while the two thugs groaned in defeat beneath them. Sarah stood there, hands on her hips, a mixture of disbelief and amusement on her face. Well, she said after a moment, that wasn't exactly what I taught you, but I guess it works. Henry slowly rolled off the thug, blinking in confusion. Did we actually just win a fight? Ben, still lying on his back, raised a hand in weak victory. I think we did. By falling? Sarah laughed, shaking her head. It's not the most graceful technique, but you did it, and that's what matters. Henry and Ben exchanged incredulous looks. They had just knocked out two criminals, completely by accident, but somehow they were starting to feel a little more confident. Sure, they weren't action heroes, but maybe, just maybe, they could handle this after all. As they left the gym, ready to face the real danger ahead, Ben turned to Henry, his grin wide. You know, we might just survive this after all. Henry chuckled, patting his friend on the back. As long as we can keep falling on people, I think we'll be okay. And with that, the two unlikely heroes marched forward into the night, ready, well, sort of, to take on whatever came next. The city streets were unusually quiet for a Saturday night as Henry and Ben sat in the front seat of the most unexpected getaway vehicle imaginable. A food truck. The brightly painted sides read, Benny's Best on Wheels, complete with a cartoon version of Ben holding a giant sandwich. But instead of serving customers, tonight the truck was about to be part of the strangest high-speed chase the city had ever seen. Remind me again how we ended up in this situation, Henry asked, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, his knuckles white. Ben, sitting in the passenger seat with wide eyes, glanced out the window. I don't know. We were supposed to be backup, not the plan. It had all happened so fast. After a successful, if accidental, takedown of two thugs at the gym, Sarah had gotten intel that the criminal gang, desperate to escape, was preparing to leave the city with the stolen technology. Sarah had chased after them, leaving Henry and Ben to keep an eye on things at the hideout. But when they saw the criminals speed away in a sleek black SUV, Ben had a brilliant idea. Follow them in his food truck. Now here they were, hurtling down the highway in a vehicle better suited for serving hot dogs than chasing dangerous criminals. Sarah was still trying to catch up, leaving Henry and Ben as the only thing standing between the gang and freedom. Henry gulped as the food truck rattled and swerved on the road. "I've never driven anything this big before." It's fine, Ben said, trying to be reassuring but sounding anything but. Just don't crash into anything." Henry's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The black SUV was weaving in and out of traffic, clearly trying to lose them. "Why are we still following them? This is crazy." Ben clutched the dashboard. "Because Sarah needs us, and because if they get away, we're going to look like total failures." Henry groaned. "We already look like total failures." Up ahead, the criminals in the SUV were just as flustered. "What is this, a joke?" one of them growled, glancing out the back window. "We're being chased by a food truck!" The driver shook his head, gritting his teeth. "I don't care what it is. Lose them!" Back in the food truck, Henry was doing everything he could just to keep the vehicle on the road. They hit a speed bump, and the truck bounced violently, sending pots and pans clanging around in the back. Ben was thrown against the door, shouting, "Who put speed bumps on a highway?" Henry didn't answer, too focused on keeping the truck from tipping over as they veered around a corner. They were entering the downtown area now, where the streets were narrower and the buildings taller. The SUV made a sharp turn down an alley, and Henry gritted his teeth. "Hold on, Ben!" He turned the wheel sharply, and the food truck screeched around the corner, somehow managing to follow the criminals into the alley. But now they were in unfamiliar territory with parked cars and dumpsters, creating a maze of obstacles. The SUV sped ahead, but in their panic, the criminals miscalculated. They were heading toward a dead end. "They're trapped!" Ben shouted, leaning forward in his seat. "I see it," Henry replied, his voice shaky. "But I don't know how to stop this thing." The food truck barreled toward the SUV, and just as Henry thought they were about to crash, he slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt. Well, almost. It skidded to the side, spinning slightly before coming to a stop, completely blocking the alley with its massive size. The criminals in the SUV slammed their fists against the dashboard in frustration. "We're boxed in!" one of them yelled. In the food truck, Henry and Ben were panting, both in shock that they had actually managed to trap the criminals. But before they could celebrate, they heard a loud bang from the back of the truck. "What was that?" Henry asked, his eyes wide. Ben's face lit up in horror. "Oh no, the donuts!" The back door of the food truck burst open, and out tumbled dozens, no, hundreds, of freshly baked donuts. In all the chaos of the chase, the boxes had broken open, and now the donuts were rolling across the pavement like sugary landmines. The criminals scrambled out of the SUV, but as they tried to run, they slipped on the avalanche of donuts, their feet sliding out from under them like cartoon characters. One by one, they crashed to the ground in a pile of cream-filled and glazed chaos. Henry and Ben stared, mouths open, as the leader of the gang, the tough, no-nonsense boss, tried to stand up but slipped on a jelly donut, landing face first in the pile of pastries. Did we just win again?" Ben asked, completely dumbfounded. Before Henry could respond, Sarah's voice came crackling through the radio they had borrowed. "Henry! Ben! Are you okay? I'm almost there!" Henry grabbed the radio, still watching the criminals struggle to stand in the sea of donuts. Yeah, we're fine. We stopped them." Sarah arrived moments later, skidding to a stop as she took in the scene. She blinked, unable to hide her disbelief, as she watched the gang leader, covered in frosting and surrounded by donuts, being handcuffed by the police. What happened here?" Sarah asked, trying to stifle a laugh. Henry shrugged, still in shock. We cornered them with the truck, and then donuts happened." Sarah shook her head, a grin spreading across her face. "Well, I can't say I've ever seen anything like this before, but you two, you saved the day." Ben beamed. "You hear that, Henry? We're heroes." Henry leaned back against the truck, still trying to process everything. "Yeah, heroes." As the police loaded the gang members into the patrol cars, Ben couldn't help but grab a donut from the pile, holding it up triumphantly. "Victory donut," Henry chuckled, taking one for himself. "Don't mind if I do." And so, as the night came to a close, Henry and Ben, two unlikely, bumbling heroes, stood in the middle of the city, eating donuts and laughing about the wildest adventure of their lives. They may not have been the most skilled or the most graceful, but somehow they had managed to stop the bad guys. And they had done it all with a food truck and a whole lot of donuts. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city as Sarah and her team finished loading the last of the gang members into police cars. Henry and Ben stood off to the side, still munching on donuts, their clothes covered in powdered sugar and jelly stains. "Who would have thought?" Henry muttered, watching the scene unfold. "Us, heroes." Ben grinned, brushing crumbs off his shirt. "I think it's the donuts that are the real heroes here." Sarah walked over, her hands on her hips and a smile on her face. "Well, boys, you did it. You helped bring down one of the biggest tech theft rings we've ever seen. I still can't believe how you managed it." "Neither can we," Henry said, shaking his head. "I think we just got lucky." Sarah laughed. "Maybe, but luck or not, the city owes you a big thanks. You're going to be famous, you know." Ben's eyes lit up. "Famous? Like famous famous? Does that mean I get a statue? Or at least free burgers for life?" Before Sarah could answer, a news van pulled up, and a reporter jumped out, microphone in hand. The cameraman was already recording as they made a beeline for Henry and Ben. "Excuse me, are you the heroes who helped stop the tech gang?" the reporter asked breathlessly. Henry looked at Ben, unsure of what to say. Well, I wouldn't say heroes exactly." "Yes," Ben interrupted, puffing out his chest. "We're the heroes, but I want to make sure the donuts get credit too. They did most of the heavy lifting." The reporter blinked, clearly confused. "Donuts?" "Long story," Henry muttered, pulling Ben back slightly. "We're just glad everything worked out." The reporter turned back to the camera, smiling brightly. "And there you have it. Two unlikely heroes who saved the city with their quick thinking and bravery. Stay tuned for more on this incredible story." As the camera crew packed up and drove away, Sarah chuckled. "Well, you're officially famous. You might want to get used to people recognizing you on the street." Henry groaned, already dreading the attention. "This is going to be so embarrassing." Ben, on the other hand, was enjoying every second. "Embarrassing? This is amazing. We're like Batman and Robin. No, wait, we're like Batman and a slightly bigger Batman." Over the next few days, Henry and Ben found themselves the talk of the town. Newspapers ran stories with headlines like, "Food truck heroes save the day," and "Local men stop tech thieves with donuts." Their pictures were everywhere, and the diner was busier than ever with curious customers wanting to meet the now famous detectives. Henry was trying his best to keep a low profile, but Ben was reveling in the attention. "Look at this, Henry," Ben said one afternoon, waving a newspaper. "We're front-page news, and there's even a photo of me holding a donut. I told you they'd be the stars." Henry sighed, sipping his coffee. "I'm just glad it's all over. I don't think I could handle another day of chasing criminals. My back is still sore from falling on that guy." Ben laughed, slapping Henry on the back. "Come on, admit it. It was fun. We're not so bad at this hero stuff after all." Henry smiled despite himself. "Yeah, I guess we did okay. But I'm not trading in my librarian job for detective work anytime soon." As the excitement died down, life slowly returned to normal for Henry and Ben. The diner was back to serving its regulars, and Henry had returned to his quiet job at the library. But something had changed. They both felt it, even if they didn't talk about it much. They had faced real danger, and somehow, against all odds, they had come out on top. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the city, Henry and Ben sat on a park bench, watching the clouds turn shades of pink and orange. Ben had a donut in hand, of course, and Henry was flipping through a new book he had picked up. "You know," Ben said after a long silence, "I never thought we'd end up doing something like that. I mean, we're just us." Henry looked up from his book, nodding. "Yeah, but I guess it goes to show you, even regular people can make a difference." Ben grinned. "Does that mean you're ready to sign up for another mission if Sarah calls?" Henry laughed, shaking his head. "No way. I'm done with high-speed chases and self-defense lessons. I'm happy being a librarian. But it's nice to know that if something crazy ever happens again, maybe we're not as helpless as we thought." Ben took a bite of his donut and leaned back on the bench, satisfied. "Yeah, I guess we've got a little more hero in us than we thought." Henry smiled, turning his gaze back to the sunset. For the first time in a long time, He felt a quiet confidence settle over him. They weren't superheroes, and they definitely weren't perfect. But they had helped when it mattered, and that was enough. As the city lights began to flicker on and the day came to an end, Henry and Ben sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they could handle it, one donut at a time.